The child was dying. Alara Thornwood could see it in the gray pallor spreading across the boy's face, in the shallow rise and fall of his chest, in the way his small fingers had stopped clutching the blanket and now lay still against the rough wool. The wasting sickness had taken hold 3 days ago, and despite everything she had done, despite the herbs and the poultices and the prayers whispered to gods she was no longer certain existed, the poison in his blood continued its relentless march toward his heart. She pressed her hand against his forehead, still burning, still fighting, but the fight was almost over. Around her, the healing wing of the royal palace stirred with the quiet desperation of those who tend to the dying. Other healers moved between beds, their faces drawn, their movements efficient but hollow. They had seen too many children like this one, too many mothers weeping in corridors, too many fathers standing rigid and silent, watching their bloodlines end. The wasting sickness had come to Thornhaven 6 weeks ago, carried by merchant ships from the southern ports. It spread through the lower districts first, as such things always did, killing the weak and the poor, while the nobles locked their gates and burned incense to ward off evil spirits. But sickness cares nothing for walls or wealth. Now it had reached the palace itself, and even the Alpha King's own guards had begun to fall. Alara withdrew her hand from the boy's forehead and stood. Her back ached from hours bent over beds. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep. But pain was an old companion, and she had learned long ago to ignore its complaints. She needed moonpetal. The herb grew only in the highest reaches of the Frostspine Mountains, blooming for precisely 3 days after each full moon. Its petals, when properly prepared, could purge the wasting sickness from a patient's blood. But the supply in the healing wing had run out 2 days ago, and without more, the boy on this bed and the dozens of others scattered throughout the palace would be dead within the week. No one had volunteered to make the climb. The Frostspine was treacherous even in summer. In late autumn, with winter storms gathering strength over the northern peaks, it was suicide. The other healers had families, obligations, reasons to live that outweighed the slim chance of returning with the herbs. They looked at the dying and shook their heads and whispered that nothing more could be done. Alara had no family, no obligations beyond the work itself, and she had spent 15 years learning the mountain's paths, mapping its dangers, understanding its moods. Her father had taught her in those few precious years before he died, and she had continued the education alone, climbing higher each season, pushing further into the cold. She could make the journey. She might even survive it. The door to the healing wing crashed open, and Lord Varen strode through as if he owned not just the room but everyone in it. He was a tall man, broad in the shoulders, with the kind of face that might have been handsome if cruelty had not carved permanent lines around his mouth. Gold chains hung from his neck, marking him as a member of the High Council. His boots left muddy prints on the floor that others would have to clean. His eyes found Alara immediately. "You," he said, pointing. "The Omega. You're needed in the Great Hall. The kitchens are short-staffed for tonight's feast." Alara did not move. "There are 50 sick patients in this wing, my lord. 3 of them will likely die before morning. I am needed here." Varen's face darkened. He was not accustomed to being refused, especially by someone of her station. In the hierarchy of their kind, Omegas ranked lowest. They were healers, servants, caretakers. They did not speak back to lords. "Know your place, girl. You are here on charity. The palace took you in when your father died, fed you, clothed you, gave you purpose, and this is how you repay that generosity, with defiance." "My father died saving your king." Alara kept her voice level, though something hot stirred in her chest. "He gave his life so that the Alpha before this one might live. If you wish me to abandon the sick to pour wine for drunk nobles, you are welcome to explain to the current king why 50 of his subjects died from lack of care. I am sure he will understand." The silence that followed was absolute. Every healer in the room had frozen, caught between the desire to flee and the morbid fascination of watching a collision they knew would end badly. Varen's hand twitched toward the knife at his belt. For a moment, Alara thought he might actually strike her. Then something shifted in his eyes, calculation replacing rage. He smiled, and it was worse than the anger. "You think yourself clever, Omega. You think your father's sacrifice protects you." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "It does not. When this sickness has passed and the dead are counted, I will remember this moment, and I will ensure you understand exactly where you belong." He turned and walked out, his gold chains rattling with each step. Alara released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Her hands were trembling. She pressed them flat against her thighs and forced the trembling to stop. She could not afford weakness. Not now. Mira found her an hour later, in the small herb garden behind the healing wing, kneeling among the withered remains of what had once been a thriving patch of medicinal plants. The first frost had killed most of them weeks ago. Alara came here sometimes anyway, when the weight of the dying became too heavy to carry. The old healer settled onto the bench beside the garden with the careful movements of someone whose joints had begun to betray her. Mira was 70 years old, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with hands that still moved with perfect precision despite the swelling in her knuckles. She had run the healing wing for 40 years. She had trained Alara from the age of 7, when a frightened orphan had been delivered to her doorstep with nothing but a small bag of clothes and a leather journal filled with a dead man's handwriting. "Lord Varen came to see me," Mira said. "He demanded I dismiss you from the healing wing." Alara's stomach tightened. And I told him that if he wished to explain to the dying why their only competent healer had been removed to soothe his wounded pride, he was welcome to make that announcement himself. The old woman's lips twitched. He left shortly after. Relief flooded through Alara, quickly followed by guilt. She had created an enemy today, and that enemy would not forget. Whatever consequences came would fall not just on her, but on Mira as well. "I should not have spoken to him that way." "No," Mira agreed. "You should not have, but I am glad you did." She reached into the folds of her robe and withdrew 2 objects. The first was a small glass vial filled with amber liquid. The second was a leather journal, worn soft by years of handling, its pages swollen with moisture and age. Alara recognized both immediately. The vial was a warming tonic, rare and valuable, capable of keeping a person alive in freezing temperatures for hours beyond what nature would allow. The journal had belonged to her father. "The moon petal must be gathered," Mira said, placing both objects in Alara's hands. "You are the only one capable of making the climb. I would not ask this of you if there were any other choice." "You are not asking." Alara turned the journal over in her hands. She had read its pages so many times she could recite entire passages from memory. Her father's handwriting, cramped and hurried, filled with observations about herbs and healing and the strange power that had lived in his blood. "You are telling me what must be done." "Yes." Mira's eyes softened. "Your father gave me a tonic like this once, many years ago. It saved my life when I was caught in a storm on the eastern ridge. I have kept it all these years, waiting for a moment when it might repay the debt." She paused. "He would be proud of you, Alara, of the woman you have become. He never wanted me to know about the power." Alara touched the journal's cover. "He hid it from me. All those years he pretended to be ordinary. He was trying to protect you. The ancestral bond is not a gift. It is a burden. Those who carry it burn bright, but they burn fast. Your father knew this better than anyone." Mira stood, her joints creaking in protest. "The journal contains more than he ever told you while he lived. When you return from the mountain, read it, all of it. There are things you need to understand." "When I return." Alara tucked the journal into her coat. "Not if. When," Mira confirmed. "Because you are Aldrich Thornwood's daughter, and he never failed to come back. Not until the very end." Alara left before dawn. The palace slept, guards nodding at their posts, servants not yet risen to begin the day's work. She moved through corridors she had known since childhood, past doors that had never opened for her, beneath tapestries depicting victories in wars she had learned about only from books. The palace had been her home for 15 years, yet she had never truly belonged to it. She was tolerated here, useful but overlooked, present but never acknowledged. Perhaps that was why she felt nothing as she walked out through the servants' gate into the cold morning air. No attachment, no regret, just the weight of her gathering basket on her shoulders and the long road ahead. The Frostbine Mountains rose to the north, their peaks lost in clouds that glowed pink with the approaching sunrise. Snow covered their upper slopes, pristine and deadly, beautiful in the way that all dangerous things are beautiful. Alara had climbed those slopes dozens of times. She knew the paths that were safe and the ones that would kill. She knew where to shelter if a storm came, and where the ice was thin enough to break beneath a careless step. But she had never climbed this late in the season, never pushed into the high reaches when winter was already tightening its grip. She walked for 4 hours before the real climbing began. The forest paths were familiar, marked by cairns her father had built decades ago, and she had maintained in the years since. The trees grew sparse as she ascended, giving way to scrub brush and then bare rock, and then nothing but snow and ice and the endless gray sky. By midday, she had reached the first of the narrow ridges that led to the alpine meadow where moonpetal grew. The wind cut through her heavy coat, finding every gap in her clothing, stealing warmth with greedy fingers. She paused to drink from her water skin and eat a handful of dried meat, resting her back against a boulder that provided minimal shelter from the gusts. It was here, sitting alone on the frozen mountainside, that she finally opened her father's journal. She had read it before, many times. The early pages were devoted to detailed descriptions of herbs and their uses, practical knowledge that had formed the foundation of her own training. But the later pages, the ones she had always skimmed over, were different, denser, more cryptic, full of references to things she had not understood as a child and had been too busy to investigate as an adult. Now, with Mira's words echoing in her mind, she read more carefully. The ancestral bond is not magic in the way that fire mages wield flames or shadow walkers bend darkness. It is something older, something woven into the blood itself, passed from parent to child across generations too numerous to count. Those who carry it can heal what cannot be healed. They can draw poison from wounded flesh, knit broken bones with a touch, pull the dying back from the threshold of death itself. But the power has a cost. Every healing takes something from the one who performs it. Not blood, not years of life exactly. Something harder to name. Call it essence, call it spirit. Call it the fundamental energy that separates the living from the dead. Each time the bond is used, some of that energy flows out of the healer and into the healed. Small uses take small amounts, large uses take more, and there is no way to replenish what is lost. Alara turned the page, her fingers numb despite her gloves. I have hidden this knowledge from Alara. She is too young to carry such weight. Perhaps, if she is fortunate, the bond will remain dormant in her blood, never awakening, never demanding the price that I have paid. But if it wakes, if she discovers what lives within her, she must know the truth. The bond can heal, but it can also kill. 20 years ago, I saved the Alpha King from shadow beast venom. I drew the poison from his blood into my own, purged it through the bond, kept him alive when any other man would have died within hours. The kingdom called me a hero. The king rewarded me with gold and land and titles, but the truth is simpler and darker. The healing nearly killed me. The venom was too strong, too concentrated, too deeply rooted in the king's system. When I pulled it out, I took too much of it into myself. For 3 days, I lay between life and death, burning with fever, screaming things I do not remember. When I finally woke, I was changed, weaker, older. Something essential had been burned away. I tell myself it was worth it. The king lived. The kingdom remained stable. My daughter has a future because of what I did. But sometimes, in those dark hours before dawn, I wonder if I made a mistake. If I traded my life for a man who did not deserve it. If the price of heroism is too high for anyone to pay. The journal continued, but Alara could not read anymore. Her eyes had blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Her father had never spoken of these things, never hinted at the cost of what he had done. He had simply grown thinner over the years, slower, grayer, until the day when a routine climb to gather herbs had ended with him falling from a path he had walked 1,000 times. They said it was an accident, a loose rock, a moment of carelessness. But now Alara wondered if the truth was different, if her father had simply run out of the strength to hold on. She closed the journal and tucked it back into her coat. The wind had grown stronger while she read, driving snow before it in horizontal sheets. The sky, which had been merely gray an hour ago, was now dark and roiling with clouds that seemed to pulse with barely contained fury. A storm was coming, a bad one. Alara pushed to her feet and began to climb faster. Miles away, in the forested valleys below the Frostspine's peaks, a very different kind of hunt was reaching its climax. Theron Blackmore, Alpha King of Thornhaven, had been tracking the great elk for 3 days. It was a magnificent beast, white-furred and silver-antlered, the kind that appeared once in a generation. Tradition demanded that a new king prove his worth by hunting alone in the sacred forests, surviving on skill and instinct, returning with a trophy worthy of the throne. Theron cared nothing for traditions, but he cared very much about the loyalty of his subjects, and that loyalty had been shaken by his brother's sudden death 6 months ago. Marcus had been everything a king should be: strong, wise, beloved. His death during a shadow beast attack had shocked the kingdom, not least because shadow beasts had been considered extinct for 2 centuries. The creatures of darkness, summoned by black magic during the ancient wars, had been hunted to oblivion generations ago. Their return was impossible, and yet Marcus was dead. Torn apart by claws that burned with supernatural fire, poisoned by venom that turned his blood to black sludge in his veins. Theron had inherited a throne he never expected and never wanted. He had spent the 6 months since trying to hold together a kingdom that seemed determined to fall apart. The wasting sickness, border incursions from rival packs, whispers of discontent among the noble houses, and always beneath it all, the question that no one dared ask aloud. Who had summoned the shadow beasts? Who had murdered the king? The elk broke from cover ahead, crashing through the underbrush with the desperate speed of prey that knows it is being run to ground. Theron shifted forms without breaking stride, his human body dissolving into golden fur and powerful muscles, his senses sharpening until he could smell the elk's fear and hear the thunder of its heartbeat. He was gaining. Another minute and he would have it. The shadow beasts hit him from 3 sides at once. They materialized from nothing, coalescing out of darkness that seemed to cling to them like living smoke. 6 of them, massive and wrong, their bodies assembled from nightmare. They moved with terrible speed, coordinated in a way that natural predators never were, flanking him and cutting off escape routes with military precision. Theron did not hesitate. He had fought shadow beasts once before, on the night his brother died. He had killed one then, badly wounded another, before Marcus ordered him to flee and save himself. He had obeyed that order. He had hated himself for it every day since. Now there was no one to save, no one to protect, just him and the darkness and the chance to finally face what he had run from. He tore into the nearest beast with fangs that had been bathed in moon-blessed silver on the night of his coronation. The creature screamed, a sound like metal tearing, and dissolved into smoke that burned where it touched his fur. Another beast lunged, and he met it with claws that opened its throat in a spray of black ichor. 3 down, then 4. But the last 2 were smarter. They hung back, circling, waiting for an opening. And Theron was tiring. The fight had taken more out of him than he wanted to admit. His wounds, though shallow, burned with the familiar fire of shadow venom. The 5th beast feinted left, and when Theron moved to intercept, the 6th struck from behind. Its fangs sank into his shoulder, pumping venom directly into his bloodstream. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, spreading through his body like wildfire, corrupting his ability to shift. He felt himself changing against his will, his powerful adult form shrinking and weakening, his control slipping away. He killed the 5th beast with a desperate lunge. The 6th fled into the shadows, its mission apparently accomplished. Theron collapsed in the bloody snow, his body continuing to change. The venom was doing something to him, forcing him into a form he had not worn since childhood. Smaller, weaker, a wolf pup, barely 40 pounds, trembling with shock and poison. He tried to shift back. Nothing happened. The venom had locked him in this form, trapped him in the body of a child, while the poison worked its way toward his heart. He had hours at most, perhaps less. Around him, the forest was silent. His pack was miles away, unaware of the attack. No one knew where he was. No one would come looking until the traditional period of the hunt ended, days from now. He was going to die alone. With the last of his strength, Theron dragged himself upward into the mountain, driven by instinct toward the high places where wolves went to meet their end. The snow deepened as he climbed, the cold biting into his small body, the venom spreading with each beat of his weakening heart. He made it further than he should have, further than the poison should have allowed, but eventually even his will gave out, and he collapsed in a shallow drift at the edge of a rocky outcropping. His golden fur matted with blood and ice, his amber eyes fixed on the storm clouds gathering overhead. This is how it ends, he thought, not in glory, not in battle. Alone on a frozen mountain, in the body of a child, killed by an enemy I never saw coming. He closed his eyes and waited for death. Alara found him an hour later. The storm had caught her halfway to the meadow, transforming the world into a howling chaos of white and gray. She had lost the path almost immediately, her careful mental maps useless in conditions where visibility dropped to mere feet. Every breath burned her lungs. Every step was a battle against wind that seemed determined to tear her off the mountain. She should have turned back, should have retreated to lower ground and waited for the weather to break. But the dying children in the palace haunted her, their pale faces floating behind her eyes every time she blinked. She pushed on, trusting her instincts, praying to whatever gods might listen that she would not walk off a cliff she could not see. Her foot caught on something buried in the snow. She stumbled, caught herself on her hands, felt the impact jar through her wrists. Cursing the rocks that seemed to appear from nowhere in these conditions, she turned to see what had tripped her. It was not a rock, golden fur, barely visible beneath the accumulating white. A small body, curled in on itself, motionless except for the faintest rise and fall of breath. A wolf pup, impossibly young to be this high on the mountain, impossibly alone in a storm that would kill anything caught in its fury. Alara's healer instincts took over before her conscious mind could object. She brushed snow from the pup's body, her hands moving automatically to check for injuries. She found them immediately. Black wounds, smoking despite the cold, spreading darkness through the golden fur like ink dropped in water. Shadow beast venom. She knew the signs because she had read her father's journal 100 times, knew the way the darkness spread, the way the edges of the wounds seemed to move on their own, the way the poison corrupted flesh at a level deeper than physical. There was no cure for shadow beast venom. Everyone who was infected died. Her father had survived only by pulling the poison into himself, and even that had cost him years of life and eventually killed him anyway. This wolf pup was already dead. It simply had not stopped breathing yet. Alara should leave, should push on to the meadow, gather what moon petals she could find, return to the palace in time to save those who could still be saved. Logic demanded it. Survival demanded it. There was nothing she could do here except die alongside a creature that was already beyond help. She reached for the pup, intending to brush the snow from its face before she walked away. A small kindness, a final comfort for something that would never know she had been there. The wolf's eyes opened, amber, deep as autumn honey, intelligent in a way that stopped her breath. Not the eyes of an animal, the eyes of a person trapped and terrified and already accepting the end. In that moment, Alara saw herself. 15 years of being overlooked. 15 years of being told she had no value, no purpose, no worth beyond her ability to fetch herbs and clean wounds. 15 years of believing that if she died on this mountain, no one would mourn her. No one would even notice she was gone. This wolf was dying alone, just like she had always expected to die. "No," she said, and the word was torn from her lips by the wind. "No." She stripped off her outer coat, ignoring the cold that immediately began eating into her body. She gathered the pup into her arms, wrapped the coat around both of them, held the small trembling form against her chest. The wolf weighed more than it should, nearly 40 pounds of dead weight that strained her exhausted muscles. But she held on. "We are not dying alone," she said into the golden fur. "Either of us." The wolf made a sound, low, pained. Its head turned, and those amber eyes found hers again. She saw understanding in them, gratitude, and something else, something like recognition, as if the wolf was seeing not just her face, but something deeper. The storm raged around them. The cold ate through her remaining clothes, finding her skin, beginning the slow process of shutting down her body. She had perhaps an hour before hypothermia claimed her. The wolf had less, but 2 bodies generated more heat than one. And Alara had the warming tonic in her pocket, the one Mira had given her, the last gift from a dead man passed through the hands of an old woman to a daughter who might now join her father in whatever came after life. She did not drink it, not yet. She wanted to save it for when things got truly desperate. Instead, she curled herself around the dying wolf, forming a shelter with her body, sharing what warmth remained in her blood. The pup pressed closer, its small head tucking beneath her chin, its breath warm against her throat. For a long time there was nothing but the howling wind and the deepening cold and 2 hearts beating in slowly synchronizing rhythm. Then something changed. Alara felt it first as warmth, spreading from where her hands pressed against the wolf's fur. Not the external warmth of shared body heat, but something internal, something rising from deep within her, flowing outward through her palms into the creature she held. The sensation was familiar somehow, as if she had known it all her life, without ever recognizing it for what it was. Golden light began to glow beneath her fingers. The wolf stiffened, made a sound that might have been surprise or pain or something else entirely. The black wounds on its body began to change, the darkness retreating before the advancing light, the corruption dissolving like shadow before sunrise. Alara did not understand what was happening, did not know that the power her father had hidden from her, the ancestral bond that slept in her blood, was finally awakening. All she knew was that the cold was fading, the storm seemed distant, and the creature in her arms was growing stronger even as she grew weaker. She was healing him, without knowledge, without intention, simply through the force of her refusal to let him die. The last thing she felt before consciousness slipped away was the wolf's body changing against hers, growing larger, reshaping into something that was no longer quite animal. The last thing she heard was howling, cutting through the wind like a blade. Not wolves, something else, something that sounded almost like words, echoing across the mountain in the voice of 30 throats. She found him. She actually found him. Alara woke to warmth, real warmth. Not the desperate, fading warmth of a body shutting down, but genuine heat, radiating against her back and draped over her side. She was lying on something soft, though she could not remember finding shelter. Her body ached, drained in a way she had never experienced before, as if something essential had been pulled out of her. She opened her eyes. She was still on the mountain, still in the snow. But the storm had passed, and weak dawn light filtered through dispersing clouds, painting the world in shades of pink and gold. And she was not alone. The weight against her side was an arm, a human arm, bare and corded with muscle, draped over her waist with casual intimacy. There was a leg tangled with hers, a body curved around her back, warm breath against the nape of her neck. She was being held by a man, a very naked man. Alara's heart, which had been beating slowly from exhaustion, suddenly thundered to life. She tried to turn, to see who held her, and the arm around her waist tightened. "Do not move yet." The voice was deep, rough, resonant with authority. "Still cold, need to stay close." The wolf, the dying wolf with amber eyes and golden fur. But wolves did not speak. Shifters in animal form could not use human words, unless they shifted back to human form. "You shifted," Alara breathed. The man behind her went very still. Then slowly, carefully, he released his hold enough for her to roll over and face him. She had expected someone injured, someone weak, someone barely clinging to life. Instead, she found herself staring at a face that belonged on statues. Strong jaw, full lips, honey gold hair falling past broad shoulders, and eyes, those same amber eyes, now set in a human face and fixed on her with an intensity that made it difficult to think. He was beautiful, devastatingly, impossibly beautiful, and very, very naked beneath the remains of her coat. "You stayed," he said. His voice was rough, as if he had not spoken in days. "I tried to tell you to go, to save yourself, but you stayed. I could not leave you to die alone." Something moved in those amber eyes. Pain, gratitude, wonder, and something else, something that made Alara's stomach tighten with an emotion she refused to name. "Your name," he said. "Tell me your name." "Alara. Alara Thornwood. I am a healer. I was collecting herbs when the storm hit. I found you, and there was no shelter, and you were hurt, and I thought we would both—" She was babbling, her thoughts scattered under his unwavering gaze, her words tumbling over each other in their haste to escape. "I am Theron," he said quietly. "Theron Blackmore." The name hit her like a physical blow. Every wolf in the kingdom knew that name. Theron Blackmore, the Alpha King who had taken the throne 6 months ago after his brother's mysterious death. The ruler of all Thornhaven, commander of the royal pack, the most powerful shifter in 7 kingdoms. And he was currently naked and pressed against her on a frozen mountainside. "You are the king," she whispered. "I am." He did not move, did not pull away, just watched her with those amber eyes, waiting for her to process what she had stumbled into. Before she could respond, a sound made them both look up. A howl, echoing across the mountainside. Then another, and another. A chorus of voices that raised every hair on Alara's body. Theron's expression shifted. Not fear, something closer to shock. "By the moon goddess," he breathed. Alara rolled over to see what he was staring at. 30 wolves sat in a perfect circle around them, massive creatures, white and gray and silver, their eyes gleaming with intelligence that had nothing to do with animal instinct. They were not surrounding them as threats. They were surrounding them as protectors. And every single wolf had its head bowed, ears back in the universal gesture of submission and respect. They were not looking at Theron. They were looking at her. The largest wolf, sitting directly before them, shifted. The transformation was fluid and fast, leaving a man kneeling in the snow. Older, perhaps 58, with silver-gray hair and ice-blue eyes, and scars crossing his bare chest in patterns that spoke of decades of battle. "Your Majesty," the man said, though his eyes never left Alara. "We have been searching since the attack. The entire kingdom has been looking." He finally glanced at Theron, and relief flooded his weathered face. "Thank the goddess you are alive." "Ragnar." There was genuine affection in Theron's voice. "I would have died without her. This is Alara. She found me dying and refused to leave." Ragnar's ice-blue eyes returned to Alara, and what she saw in them made her deeply uncomfortable. Recognition, awe, something that looked almost like reverence. "She has the gift," Ragnar said quietly, "the ancestral bond. That is why the pack bows." "I do not have any gift." Alara's voice came out higher than she intended. "I am just a healer's assistant. I collect herbs and prepare medicines. There is nothing special about me." Ragnar smiled, and it transformed his harsh features into something almost gentle. "You lay beside a dying king, shared your warmth and your will to live, and brought him back from the edge of death." He gestured at Theron's torso, where the black wounds had been. "Shadow beast venom should have killed him hours before you found him. But look at him now." Alara looked. Where there should have been smoking darkness and corrupted flesh, there was only pink new skin. Scars, yes, but healed. Impossibly, completely healed. "That is not possible," she whispered. "Shadow beast venom has no cure. My father died from it. Everyone who gets infected dies." "Everyone without the ancestral bond dies," Ragnar corrected. "But those with the gift can heal even what seems beyond healing, through connection, through shared life force." His eyes grew distant. "Your father had the same gift. He saved the old king using it 15 years ago. It is why the shadow beast venom killed him. He purged it from the king, but took too much into himself." A pause. "We thought the gift died with him. But you inherited it. You just never knew." The 30 wolves surrounding them howled, a sound of celebration and recognition that echoed off the mountain peaks and seemed to shake the very air. Alara stared at them, at Ragnar, at Theron, who was watching her with an expression she could not read. "I need to get back to the palace," she said. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Wrong, somehow, like someone else was speaking with her mouth. "I have moon petal to deliver. People are sick. They need you." Theron's voice was soft, but carried the weight of command. "Alara, you saved the king's life. That alone makes you important. But if you truly have the ancestral bond, you are invaluable. There has not been a carrier in 2 centuries. "I just wanted to collect herbs," Alara said, and to her horror, felt tears burning at the back of her eyes. "I was not trying to be special or important. I just did not want you to die alone." "And that," Ragnar said, "is exactly why the pack recognizes you. The ancestral bond does not come from seeking power or glory. It comes from those who see life as sacred, who cannot walk past suffering, who choose connection over survival." He bowed his head deeper than before. "You are true Luna, whether you accept it or not, and this pack will serve you as faithfully as it serves its king." The other 29 wolves bowed again in perfect synchronization. Alara wanted to run, wanted to flee down the mountain and hide in the healing wing and pretend none of this had ever happened. But Theron had risen, finding clothes that the pack had apparently brought, and his hand closed around hers before she could move. "Come with me," he said. "Back to the palace. There is much we need to discuss." It was not a request. The steel beneath his words made that clear. Alara looked at his hand holding hers, at the 30 wolves watching her with something uncomfortably close to worship, at the mountain peaks catching the morning light, beautiful and indifferent to the chaos of mortal concerns. She had climbed this mountain to gather herbs and save dying children. She was descending it as something else entirely. True Luna, The words echoed in her mind as she followed the king down the mountain, surrounded by wolves who bowed when she passed, carrying a power she did not understand toward a future she had never imagined. Behind her, unnoticed, the storm clouds began to gather again on the northern horizon, darker this time, and somehow hungry. The room they gave her was beautiful. Alara stood at the center of it, turning slowly, taking in the vaulted ceiling with its painted murals of wolves running beneath a silver moon, the four-poster bed draped in silks the color of midnight, the fireplace crackling with flames that cast dancing shadows across walls hung with tapestries worth more than she would earn in 10 lifetimes. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases on every surface. A copper bathtub steamed in one corner, filled with water that smelled of lavender and rose. It was the kind of room she had glimpsed through doorways during her years in the palace, the kind reserved for visiting dignitaries and noble ladies and people who mattered. It was also a prison. She had noticed the guards the moment Theron's entourage delivered her here. 2 of them, positioned on either side of the door, their faces carefully blank. They had not followed her inside. They did not need to. The message was clear enough without words. You are not a guest. You are an asset, and assets do not wander freely. Alara walked to the window and looked out over the palace grounds. From this height, she could see the training yards where soldiers drilled in precise formations, the gardens where noble ladies walked arm in arm, the distant spires of the temple where priests offered prayers to the moon goddess. Life continued as it always had, indifferent to the fact that everything she understood about herself had shattered on a frozen mountainside. 3 days had passed since she woke in the king's arms. 3 days since 30 wolves bowed before her and an old warrior called her True Luna. 3 days of being escorted through corridors she had walked freely her entire life, of being watched and measured and assessed by eyes that saw not Alara the healer, but something else entirely. She had not been allowed to return to the healing wing, had not been permitted to see Mira or check on the patients dying from wasting sickness. Her gathering basket, with its precious cargo of moon petal, had been taken from her upon arrival at the palace. Someone else would prepare the medicine. Someone else would save the children she had climbed a mountain to help. She was too important now for such mundane work. The irony was not lost on her. A knock at the door made her turn. Before she could respond, it opened, and Ragnar stepped inside. The old warrior had exchanged his battle-scarred nakedness for simple clothes, dark trousers, and a gray tunic that did nothing to hide the power in his frame. His ice-blue eyes found hers immediately, reading her expression with the ease of someone who had spent decades studying faces for signs of threat or weakness. "You have not eaten," he observed. A tray sat untouched on a small table near the fireplace. "The food is not poisoned, if that concerns you." "I am not hungry." "You should be. The bond takes energy when it is used. Your body needs fuel to replenish what was lost." He crossed to the table and lifted the cover from the tray, revealing roasted meat and fresh bread and vegetables glistening with butter. "Eat. That is not a request." Something in his tone reminded her of Mira. The same mixture of concern and command, the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed, but who also genuinely cared about the outcome. Alara sat. She picked up a piece of bread and forced herself to take a bite. It tasted like ashes in her mouth, but she chewed and swallowed and took another bite because Ragnar was watching, and she would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her weakness. "Better." He settled into the chair across from her, his scarred hands resting on his knees. "I know this is difficult, being pulled from everything familiar and thrust into a world you do not understand, but you must know that you are not in danger here. The guards outside my door suggest otherwise. The guards are for your protection, not your imprisonment. Then I am free to leave, to return to the healing wing and resume my duties?" Ragnar's silence was answer enough. "I thought so." Alara set down the bread. "I am a prisoner, a comfortable one, yes, with silk sheets and hot baths, but a prisoner nonetheless. You are a strategic asset in a kingdom at war." Ragnar's voice hardened. "Shadow beasts have returned after 2 centuries. The king nearly died. Someone with enough power and knowledge to summon creatures of darkness is moving against the throne. And you, whether you intended it or not, possess an ability that could turn the tide of whatever conflict is coming." He leaned forward. "If our enemies learn of your existence before we can protect you, they will not send guards to watch your door. They will send assassins to slit your throat." The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Alara felt the ripples spreading through her, disturbing the carefully maintained calm she had been using to shield herself from the reality of her situation. "Who?" she asked. "Who is behind this?" "We do not know. Not yet." Ragnar's jaw tightened. "But I have suspicions, and if I am right, then the danger is closer than any of us want to believe. Tell me." For a long moment, Ragnar did not speak. He studied her face, weighing something, making a decision. "I knew your father," he said finally. "Aldrich Thornwood. We fought together many years ago, before either of us had gray in our hair. He was the finest man I ever served beside, honorable, brave, the kind of warrior who made others want to be better simply by standing near him." Alara's throat tightened. "He never spoke of his past, not the fighting parts." "No, he would not have. Aldrich believed that violence was a necessary evil, not something to boast about." Ragnar's eyes grew distant. "When he saved the old king from shadow beast venom, I was there. I watched him do the impossible, watched him pull darkness from another man's blood and take it into himself, watched him nearly die from the effort." A pause. "And I watched him, in the weeks that followed, become convinced that the attack was not random." "What do you mean?" "Shadow beasts do not simply appear. They must be summoned, bound, controlled. It requires knowledge that has been forbidden for centuries and power that few possess. Someone arranged for those creatures to attack the king. Someone within the palace itself." The implication settled over Alara like a cold shroud. "You think my father was investigating. You think he found something." "I think he found someone." Ragnar's voice dropped. "And I think that someone killed him before he could reveal the truth." "The fall. They said it was an accident, a loose rock on a path he had walked 1,000 times. Aldrich Thornwood did not make careless mistakes. Not on terrain he knew better than his own heartbeat." Ragnar held her gaze. "Your father was murdered, Alara, and the one who killed him is still here, still watching, still waiting." The words should have shocked her, should have shattered something fundamental in her understanding of the world. But instead, they clicked into place like a key turning in a lock, confirming what some part of her had always suspected but never allowed herself to examine. Her father's death had never felt right. The official story had never quite fit the man she remembered. "Who?" Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Who do you suspect?" "I cannot say. Not without proof. Not without risking everything on accusations that might be wrong." Ragnar stood. "But I tell you this so you understand the stakes. So you know that the power in your blood is not just a gift, but a target. Your father died because of what he knew and what he could do. If you are not careful, you will follow him." He walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "The king wishes to see you. I will return in 1 hour to escort you to him. I suggest you finish eating and prepare yourself." A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. Theron Blackmore is many things, but patient is not among them. The door closed behind him. The lock did not turn. Small mercies. Alara looked at the food on her tray, at the luxury surrounding her, at the window through which she could see a world that had become suddenly and terrifyingly complicated. Then she began to eat. Theron received her in his private study, not the throne room where formal audiences took place. The distinction was significant, though Alara was not certain what it signified. The study was smaller than she expected, lined with books and maps, dominated by a massive desk covered in documents that suggested the king spent more time working than ruling. He stood when she entered, dismissing Ragnar with a nod. The old warrior withdrew, but Alara noticed he did not go far. His presence lingered just outside the door, a shadow of protection she was not certain she wanted. "Sit," Theron gestured to a chair facing his desk. "Please." The please was unexpected. Kings did not typically ask. Alara sat. She had dressed carefully for this meeting, choosing the simplest of the gowns that had mysteriously appeared in her wardrobe. Dark blue, modest in cut, nothing that would suggest she was trying to impress or seduce. She was a healer, not a courtier. She would not pretend to be something she was not. Theron remained standing, watching her with those amber eyes that seemed to see too much. He had cleaned up since the mountain, his honey-gold hair pulled back from his face, his body clad in the dark formal clothes of his station. But beneath the trappings of royalty, she could still see the wolf, still sense the wildness that no amount of civilization could fully tame. "You are angry," he said, not a question. "I am confused and frustrated, and yes, angry." Alara kept her voice level. 3 days ago, I was a healer's assistant with no power and no importance. Now I am locked in a golden cage being told I am too valuable to be allowed my freedom. Forgive me if I have not adjusted gracefully. The restrictions are temporary until we understand the threat and can ensure your safety. My safety. She allowed a hint of bitterness to color the words. Is that what we are calling it? Something flickered in Theron's eyes. Irritation, perhaps, or respect. It was difficult to tell with him. His face seemed designed to conceal rather than reveal. What would you call it? Control. You do not know what I can do. You do not know if I am dangerous or useful or both. So you keep me close where you can watch me, study me, determine how best to use me. Alara met his gaze without flinching. I am not a fool, Your Majesty. I have spent my life being underestimated, which means I have spent my life watching. I know how power works. I know what powerful people do to those they consider assets. Theron was silent for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. It transformed his face, softening the harsh lines, making him look younger and somehow more human. Ragnar said you were intelligent. He understated. The king moved around his desk and leaned against it, arms crossed, the formal distance between them suddenly reduced. You are correct. I do not know what you can do. I do not know if you are dangerous or useful or both, and I am keeping you close because the alternative is to let you wander freely while enemies who have already tried to kill me once might decide to try again through you. Then let me prove myself. How? Alara had not planned this, had not thought beyond the immediate confrontation, but the words came anyway, rising from somewhere deep in her chest where fear and pride and something else tangled together. You have wounded, guards who were injured defending the palace, soldiers who came back from patrols with wounds that will not heal properly. Let me treat them. Let me show you what the bond can do under controlled conditions. She stood, refusing to remain seated while he towered over her. You want to know if I am useful? Give me a chance to be useful. You want to know if I'm dangerous? Watch me work and judge for yourself. Theron studied her for a long moment. His eyes moved over her face, searching for something she could not name. Very well. He pushed it off the desk and walked to the door. Come with me. The healing ward for the Royal Guard occupied the lower level of the eastern wing. It was larger than the civilian healing hall where Alara had spent most of her life, better equipped, with more beds and more supplies. But the smell was the same. Blood and herbs, and the particular desperation of those fighting to keep the dying alive. Theron led her through the rows of occupied beds without ceremony, ignoring the startled looks from the healers on duty. He stopped beside a bed where a young wolf lay unconscious, bandages wrapped around his torso, his breathing shallow and labored. Fenris, Theron said quietly. One of my personal guard. He took a wound defending me during the Shadow Beast attack on the mountain. The healers have done what they can, but the wound is infected. It will not respond to treatment. Alara moved to the bedside without waiting for permission. She pulled back the bandages carefully, her trained eyes assessing the damage beneath. The wound was bad. Ragged edges that spoke of claws rather than blades, skin inflamed and hot to the touch, the telltale darkness of corruption spreading outward from the injury. Not Shadow Beast venom, something else. Something the body was fighting and losing against. The infection has reached his blood, she said. Another day, perhaps 2, and it will reach his heart. Normal treatment will not save him. Can you? Alara looked at the young wolf's face. He was barely more than a boy, perhaps 18 or 19, with features that were still soft with youth. Someone's son, someone's friend, someone who had been willing to die for his king and was now dying anyway. She placed her hands on his chest, over the wound, and reached for the warmth she had felt on the mountain. It came easier this time, as if using it once had opened a door that could not be fully closed again. Golden light bloomed beneath her palms, spreading into the young wolf's body, seeking out the corruption and beginning to burn it away. The sensation was strange. Not quite pain, but something adjacent to it. A pulling, a draining, as if the light was being drawn from her own blood and given to his. She could feel the infection retreating, the damaged tissue beginning to knit itself back together, the poison in his blood dissolving before the advance of whatever power lived inside her. But she could also feel herself weakening, growing tired, growing old somehow in ways that had nothing to do with years. She kept going, pushed deeper, pulled harder. The golden light intensified until it was almost too bright to look at, until even the healers across the room had to shield their eyes. Then it was done. Alara pulled her hands back and nearly collapsed. Only Theron's arm around her waist kept her upright. She had not heard him move, had not noticed him close the distance between them, but he was there, solid and warm, holding her against him while she fought to catch her breath. "Look," someone whispered. She looked. The wound was gone. Not scarred over or minimized, but gone entirely, as if it had never existed. The young wolf's breathing had deepened, normalized, and color was returning to his cheeks. He would live. "That is what I can do." Alara's voice came out weaker than she intended. "That is what the bond does. Heals what cannot be healed, saves those who should be beyond saving." She pulled away from Theron's support, forcing her legs to hold her. "But it costs. Every healing takes something from me. Use it too much and I will burn out, just like my father did." Theron's eyes had not left her face. Something new lived in them now. Not the suspicion and calculation of before. Something warmer, something that looked almost like awe. "How do you feel?" "Tired, drained, like I have not slept in a week." She managed a thin smile. "But I will recover. The bond does not take everything at once. It chips away piece by piece, healing by healing. My father survived for years after his great healing. He just diminished, slowly, until there was nothing left. We will find a way to prevent that." Theron's voice carried the weight of a vow. "You are not a tool to be used until you break. You are—" He stopped, seemed to struggle with words. "You are important. Not just your power. You." It was the first time since she had met him that he sounded uncertain. Before Alara could respond, commotion at the entrance drew both their attention. Ragnar appeared, his face grave, followed by another man Alara had never seen before. He was older, perhaps 55, with silver hair swept back from a high forehead and eyes the color of storm clouds. He moved with the careful grace of someone who had spent a lifetime learning to appear harmless, and he wore the robes of a palace counselor, deep purple trimmed with silver thread. But it was his smile that made Alara uneasy. Too warm, too practiced. The smile of someone who had learned exactly which muscles to move to create the appearance of friendliness. "Your Majesty!" The man bowed with fluid precision. "I heard our young guest was demonstrating her abilities. I hoped I might witness the result." Theron's posture shifted subtly, tension entering his frame in ways that only someone watching closely would notice. "Lord Malachar, I did not send for you." "No, but the healing ward is not restricted to invited visitors." The smile never wavered. "And I confess to a personal interest in anyone who carries the ancestral bond. It has been a subject of my studies for many years." His storm-gray eyes found Alara, and she felt the weight of his attention like a physical pressure. "You must be Aldrich Thornwood's daughter. The resemblance is striking." He stepped closer, and something in Alara wanted to step back, though she could not have explained why. "Your father and I were colleagues once, fellow scholars pursuing knowledge that the rest of the world had forgotten. His death was a great loss to our research." "You knew my father?" "Quite well. We spent many long nights discussing the nature of the bond and its potential applications." Malachar's smile warmed further, becoming almost paternal. "I have something that belonged to him, actually, something I have been waiting to give to his heir, if one ever emerged." He reached into his robes and produced a small leather-bound book, a portion of his research journal, pages I copied before his death with his permission. I believe they contain knowledge that you will find illuminating." Alara took the book automatically, her healer's instincts responding to the offer before her conscious mind could object. The leather was worn soft with age, the pages within covered in handwriting she recognized immediately. Her father's handwriting. "He trusted me," Malachar continued softly. "Before he died, he told me that if anything happened to him, I should watch for you, wait for the bond to awaken, help you understand what you are and what you can become." Those storm-gray eyes held hers. "I know this must be overwhelming, but you are not alone, Alara. Your father made certain of that." She should be suspicious. Everything Ragnar had told her about enemies within the palace, about her father's murder, should have her walls raised and her guard high. But the book in her hands felt real. The handwriting was unmistakably her father's, and Malachar's words aligned with everything she had read in the journal Mira had given her. "Thank you," she heard herself say. "I will read this carefully. Take your time. And please, if you have questions, seek me out. Your father was my friend. Helping his daughter is the least I can do to honor his memory." Malachar bowed again, to her this time rather than to Theron, and withdrew with the same careful grace with which he had entered. Theron watched him go with narrowed eyes. "Be careful with that one," he said quietly. "Malachar has served the palace for 30 years. He has survived 3 kings and more political upheavals than I can count. Men do not achieve that kind of longevity by accident." "You do not trust him?" "I do not trust anyone." Theron's gaze returned to her, softer now but still guarded. "Neither should you. Not until you know who your real enemies are." The days that followed settled into a rhythm that was not quite captivity and not quite freedom. Alara was allowed to move more freely through the palace, though guards still shadowed her steps. She was permitted to visit the healing wing, though not to resume her former duties. She could walk the gardens, attend meals in the lesser hall, even access the library where she spent hours poring over texts about the ancestral bond and its history. But always she was watched. Always she was aware of the boundaries surrounding her. Ragnar began training her to control the bond, not to use it more powerfully, but to use it more efficiently, to sense injuries without touching, to heal without draining herself completely, to understand the limits of what she could do and the costs of exceeding them. "The bond is not infinite," he explained during one of their sessions. "It draws from your life force. Use it wisely, and you can heal for decades. Use it recklessly, and you will burn out in years." "My father used it recklessly." "Your father saved a king." Ragnar's voice was gentle. "He made a choice, knowing the cost, knowing what it would mean for him and for you. Do not diminish that sacrifice by calling it reckless." Theron summoned her daily, sometimes to heal wounded soldiers, sometimes to discuss what she had learned about her power, sometimes increasingly simply to talk. He told her about his brother Marcus, the beloved king whose death had shattered the stability of the realm, the golden child who had been everything a ruler should be while Theron lurked in his shadow, the spare heir that no one expected to need. "I was not supposed to be king." They sat in his study, late evening light painting the walls in shades of amber and rose. "Marcus was trained for it from birth. I was trained to support him, to lead armies if needed, to handle the things he could not. When he died," Theron's voice faltered. "When he died, I inherited a throne I had never wanted and a kingdom I did not know how to save." "You are doing better than you think." Alara spoke without planning to, the words emerging from observation rather than flattery. "The guards speak of you with respect. The servants do not fear you. And you came to the healing ward yourself, rather than sending others. That matters." "Does it?" His smile was bitter. "Tell that to the nobles who whisper that I am too young, too inexperienced, too unproven. Tell that to the enemies gathering at our borders, sensing weakness. Tell that to whoever murdered my brother and is even now plotting to murder me." "You believe Marcus was murdered?" "I know he was. Shadow beasts do not appear from nothing. Someone summoned them, controlled them, sent them specifically to kill the king." Theron's hands clenched on the arms of his chair. "And that same someone sent them after me on the mountain. The attack was coordinated, planned, executed with precision. They knew where I would be and when. They knew how to separate me from my guard. An insider. Almost certainly. But who? I have looked at every member of my council, every commander in my army, every noble with access to the palace. Any of them could be the traitor. None of them have given me proof." He met her eyes. "Until I find that proof, I am surrounded by potential enemies and certain of nothing." Alara thought of Malachar, of his too smooth smile and his conveniently timed gift, of the journal pages she had read, which contained nothing dangerous or secret, only general information about the bond that she could have found in any library. Why give her something so innocuous? Unless the gift itself was the point, not its contents. A gesture designed to build trust for purposes not yet revealed. "Ragnar suspects someone," she said carefully. "He would not tell me who, but he believes my father was murdered as well, by the same person who killed your brother." Theron nodded slowly. "Ragnar has shared his suspicions with me. We are watching, waiting for the traitor to make a mistake." His eyes searched hers. "Can you be patient, Alara? Can you play the role of the cautious newcomer while we work to unmask our enemy? I have spent my life being underestimated. Playing cautious is not difficult." She paused. "But I want something in return." "Name it." "Train me. Not just my power, but my body. Teach me to fight, to defend myself, to survive if your guards fail, and I am alone with enemies." She leaned forward. "I will not be helpless again. I will not wait to be rescued or protected. Whatever is coming, I want to face it on my own feet." Something shifted in Theron's expression. Surprise, perhaps, and then something warmer. Approval. "Done. I will train you myself starting tomorrow." He stood, and Alara rose with him. "You are not what I expected, Alara Thornwood." "What did you expect?" "Someone soft, someone frightened, someone who would need to be coddled and protected and managed." He moved closer, near enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Instead, I find steel wrapped in silk, a healer with the heart of a warrior. I am my father's daughter." "Yes," his voice dropped, "you are." The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibilities neither of them was ready to name. Then Theron stepped back, and the tension eased. "Tomorrow," he said. "Dawn, the training yard. Do not be late." He turned and left, and Alara stood alone in his study, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. The training was brutal. Theron did not coddle her, did not soften his blows or slow his movements or treat her like the fragile Omega everyone assumed she was. He came at her with the full force of a warrior king, and he expected her to meet him or fail trying. She failed, often, spectacularly. But she also learned. Her body, softened by years of healing work rather than combat training, began to harden. Muscles she did not know she had started to ache, then strengthen. Her reflexes sharpened. Her awareness expanded. She learned to read the subtle shifts in an opponent's weight that telegraphed their next move, to use her smaller size as an advantage rather than a weakness. And she learned other things too, things that had nothing to do with fighting. She learned the way Theron's eyes crinkled when he genuinely smiled, rare as those smiles were. She learned the sound of his laugh, even rarer. She learned that he carried the weight of his brother's death like a stone around his neck, that he blamed himself for surviving when Marcus had not, that he drove himself to exhaustion because stopping meant thinking and thinking meant remembering. She learned that he was not the cold, calculating king she had first taken him for. He was a man in pain, doing his best to hold together a kingdom that seemed determined to crumble. And somewhere in the midst of training sessions and late-night conversations and the slow building of trust, she learned that her heart had begun to beat differently when he was near. The attack came on the 7th day of her training. Alara was in the lesser hall eating a midday meal alone when the screaming started. Not human screams, but something worse, the howling, shrieking cries of shadow beasts tearing through the palace grounds. She ran, not away from the danger, but toward it. Her training with Theron had taught her the layout of the palace, the quickest routes to the main courtyard where the sounds of battle were loudest. She burst through a side door and into chaos. 6 shadow beasts had materialized inside the palace walls, bypassing every ward and guard. They were killing everything they could reach, their black forms leaving trails of corruption wherever they passed. Guards fought them with silver weapons, and some fell, and more took their places. Theron was at the center of the battle, transformed into his wolf form, massive and golden and magnificent. He tore through the creatures with fangs and claws, but there were too many, and they were too fast, and even as she watched, one of them scored a line of black across his flank. 4 guards lay wounded on the ground, their bodies smoking with venom. Alara did not think, did not calculate the risks or weigh the costs. She ran to the nearest fallen guard and dropped to her knees, pressing her hands to his chest. Golden light exploded outward. She healed him, then moved to the next, then the next. Each healing took more from her than the last, the drain intensifying as her reserves depleted. But she kept going, kept pushing, kept refusing to let them die. A shadow beast noticed her, turned from its current prey, lunged with claws extended. Ragnar intercepted it, his wolf form slamming into the creature with enough force to send both of them tumbling. The beast's claws raked across his side, but he did not slow, did not stop until his fangs had torn out its throat. The remaining pack members moved without needing orders. They formed a protective ring around Alara, holding the beasts at bay while she worked. 30 wolves against creatures of nightmare, buying time with their bodies, with their blood, with their lives if necessary. She saved all 4 guards. The last shadow beast fell to Theron's fangs as Alara completed the final healing. She tried to stand and found that her legs would not cooperate. The world tilted sideways, and then she was falling, and then strong arms caught her. Theron had shifted back, human and naked and covered in wounds, but his eyes were clear, focused entirely on her. "You reckless fool," he breathed. "You magnificent reckless fool. You could have been killed. They needed help." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "I could not let them die." "And if you had died saving them, what then?" She tried to answer, but darkness was creeping in at the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw before consciousness slipped away was Theron's face, terrified and furious, and something else that looked almost like love. During the chaos of battle, Alara had seen something that lodged in her mind like a splinter. Lord Varen, standing in the shadows near the eastern gate, speaking to a figure made of darkness itself. The shadow had moved with purpose, directing the beasts, pointing them toward specific targets, and Varen had watched with a smile on his cruel face. She told Theron when she woke. They were in his chambers, she on his bed, he in a chair pulled close enough to touch. His wounds had been bandaged, though she could see the pain in his movements when he shifted position. "You are certain?" His voice was carefully controlled, but she could see the fury burning beneath. "I know what I saw. Varen is working with whoever controls the shadow beasts. He is part of this. But not the mastermind." Theron's jaw clenched. Varen does not have the intelligence or the magical knowledge to summon creatures like that. Someone else is using him. Malachar. The name hung between them like a blade. "I have no proof," Alara continued, "only instinct. But everything about him feels wrong. The convenient timing of his gifts, the way he positions himself as my father's friend. He is building trust, laying groundwork for something. Ragnar suspects the same." Theron reached out and took her hand, his grip warm and solid. "We will watch them both. Wait for them to make a mistake, and when they do, we will be ready. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we continue as we have been. Training, learning, preparing." His thumb traced circles on her palm, a gesture so intimate it made her breath catch. "You saved 4 lives today, Alara. You ran into danger when anyone else would have fled. Do you have any idea how extraordinary that is?" "I did what anyone would do." "No. You did what only you could do. What only you would do." He raised her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "I have known many warriors in my life, many brave men and women who would face death without flinching, but I have never known anyone like you." The words settled over her like a warm blanket, filling spaces she had not known were empty. "I feel the bond between us," Theron continued quietly. "I have felt it since I woke on that mountain with you in my arms. It pulls at me, demands that I protect you, claims you as mine in ways I do not fully understand. I feel it too." "Then you know what it means, what it is asking of us." Alara nodded slowly. The mate bond, the ancient magic that connected wolf souls across lifetimes. She had read about it in her father's journals, had heard whispers of it in the healing wing, but she had never expected to feel it herself, had never imagined that the pull she felt toward this man was anything more than attraction. "What do you want?" she asked. "Not what the bond wants. What do you want?" Theron was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I want you. Not because of the bond, not because of your power, because you are the strongest person I have ever met, because you make me feel like perhaps I can be the king this kingdom needs. Because when I am with you, I am not drowning in grief and guilt and fear." He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. "I want you, Alara, if you will have me." She answered him with a kiss. It was not gentle. It was fire and need and the release of tension that had been building since the first moment their eyes met on that frozen mountain. His hands came up to cup her face, tilting her head to deepen the kiss, and she melted into him, giving herself over to the flames. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "Stay with me tonight," Theron said. "Not to... I just want you here, close, where I know you are safe." Alara should refuse, should maintain some boundary, some distance, some protection against the depth of feeling that threatened to overwhelm her. Instead, she shifted on the bed, making room for him beside her. "I will stay." Theron climbed in next to her, still careful of his wounds, and pulled her against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, synchronizing with her own. "Whatever comes next," he murmured against her hair, "we face it as one." "As one," she agreed. Outside the window, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the palace, enemies plotted and shadows gathered, but here, in this moment, Alara felt something she had not felt in 15 years. Safe, seen, home. She closed her eyes and let sleep claim her, held in the arms of a king who had chosen her not for her power, but for herself. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new dangers, new tests of everything they were building between them. But tonight they had each other. And for now, that was enough. The mate bond ceremony took place 3 nights after the attack. Not in the great hall where such things were traditionally announced, not before the gathered nobles and the watching court, but in the ancient grove behind the palace, where the oldest trees of Thornhaven stretched their branches toward a sky heavy with stars. Ragnar stood as witness. The 30 wolves of the royal pack formed a circle around them, silent sentinels to a bonding that would reshape the kingdom. Alara wore white. Not the elaborate gown of a noble bride, but simple cloth, unadorned, the kind of garment her father might have recognized. Theron wore black, the ceremonial colors of the Blackmore line, with the silver circlet of kingship resting on his brow. They stood facing each other in the moonlight, and for a moment neither spoke. "This is not how it is supposed to happen," Theron said quietly. "There should be feasts, proclamations, weeks of celebration. Do you want those things?" "No." His smile was soft, genuine, free of the calculation that usually shadowed his expressions. "I want you. The rest is performance." Ragnar stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of ritual older than the palace itself. "Before the moon goddess and all who gather here, 2 souls seek to become one. Theron Blackmore, Alpha King of Thornhaven, do you claim this woman as your mate, your partner, your equal in all things?" "I do." "Alara Thornwood, bearer of the ancestral bond, do you accept this man as your mate, your partner, your king, and your equal?" "I do." "Then let the bond be sealed." Theron took her hands in his. She could feel the warmth of his skin, the steady pulse of his heart, the ancient magic that lived in both of them, reaching toward each other, like flames seeking fuel. The bond flared. Golden light erupted from where their hands joined, spreading outward in waves that washed over the assembled wolves. Alara felt it happening at levels deeper than physical, felt herself opening to him and him opening to her, felt the walls between them dissolving, replaced by connections so profound it defied language. She could sense his emotions now, his hope and his fear, his determination and his doubt, his love, raw and overwhelming, a force that had grown from wary respect to something that would reshape both their lives. And he could sense her, all of her, the lonely child who had grown up overlooked and forgotten, the healer who had found purpose in saving lives, the woman who had climbed a mountain and found something she never expected. The light faded, the wolves howled, a chorus of recognition and celebration. And Alara Thornwood, who had spent her life unnoticed, became Luna, true Luna, partner to a king. The mark appeared on her wrist during the ceremony, a silver outline of a crescent moon that matched the one now visible on Theron's skin. She traced it with her finger as the wolves dispersed into the shadows of the grove. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we prepare." Theron's eyes had gone hard, the softness of the ceremony replaced by the steel of command. "Varen will report to whoever controls him. They will know that our alliance is complete. They will have to move soon, before the bond strengthens further. Then we must be ready when they do." 2 weeks passed after the ceremony, and Malachar made his move. Not with violence, not with shadow beasts or assassins in the night. He came with kindness, with offers of help, with the patient persistence of a predator who knew that some prey must be lured rather than chased. He found Alara in this library on the first day of the 3rd week, surrounded by texts about the ancestral bond that she had been studying since her power awakened. She looked up at his approach, careful to keep her expression neutral, to show nothing of the suspicion that coiled in her chest. "My Lady Luna," he bowed with fluid grace, "I hope I am not disturbing your research." "Not at all, Lord Malachar. I was reading about the historical applications of the bond, fascinating material, though incomplete. That is because the complete knowledge was lost centuries ago, when the last bond carriers died without passing on their secrets." He settled into a chair across from her, uninvited but somehow making the intrusion seem natural. "Your father was working to reconstruct that knowledge. He made significant progress before his passing." "So you mentioned. The journal pages you gave me were helpful." "I am glad." His storm-gray eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "But those pages were only a portion of what Aldrich discovered. There is more, much more. knowledge that could help you master your abilities far more quickly than trial and error would allow. Alara set down the book she had been reading. What kind of knowledge? Techniques for amplifying the bond's power, methods for healing multiple people simultaneously, ways to extend your reach beyond physical touch. Malachar leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Your father believed that a fully trained bond carrier could heal an entire army, could turn the tide of any battle, could make a kingdom invincible. The words were seductive. Alara could feel their pull, the temptation to believe that there were shortcuts, easier paths, ways to become powerful without paying the price her father had paid. But she had read his real journal. She knew what Malachar was not saying. That sounds remarkable, she said, keeping her voice carefully eager. Would you teach me? Malachar's smile widened, and for just a moment, something cold flickered behind his eyes. It would be my honor. The lessons began that afternoon. Malachar was a passionate teacher, explaining techniques with the precision of a scholar who had spent decades studying his subject. He showed her how to extend her awareness beyond her immediate surroundings, how to sense injuries at a distance, how to channel the bond's healing light through the air rather than requiring physical contact. And the techniques worked. Alara could feel her power growing, expanding, becoming something larger than it had been. She healed a guard's broken arm from across the room. She soothed the pain of a servant's headache without rising from her chair. She learned to feel the health of everyone in a building, a kind of sixth sense that pulsed at the edges of her consciousness. But each lesson left her more exhausted than the last. At first, she dismissed it as the natural cost of learning. New skills required energy. Growth demanded sacrifice. But as the days passed and the exhaustion deepened, she began to notice other changes. Her appetite faded. Her sleep became restless and filled with dark dreams. The face she saw in mirrors looked thinner, older, as if years were being stripped away 1 hour at a time. Mira found her in the herb garden on the 5th day of training, sitting on the same bench where they had spoken weeks ago. You look terrible, the old healer said without preamble, settling beside her with the careful movements of age. When did you last eat a full meal? I am not hungry. That is the problem. Mira's sharp eyes missed nothing. The bond is consuming you, child, eating you from the inside out. I have seen this before. Alara's heart stuttered. When? With your father. In the months before he died. Mira's voice dropped. He grew thin, like you are growing thin. Tired like you are tired. He said he was fine, that he was simply working hard, that there was nothing to worry about. And then one day he went up the mountain and did not come back. The fall was an accident. The fall was a symptom. Mira gripped her hand with surprising strength. Aldrich was not careless, Alara. He fell because he had nothing left, because the bond had taken everything he had to give, because someone taught him to use his power in ways that drained him faster than he could recover. The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples spread through Alara's mind, connecting pieces she had been refusing to see. Who taught him? Mira's eyes held hers. Who do you think? That night, Alara waited until the palace slept. Then she crept to her father's study, the small room in the healing wing that had been left untouched since his death. Mira had given her the key years ago, but she had never used it. The room had felt too sacred, too painful to disturb. Now she needed what it contained. The study was exactly as Aldrich had left it. Books lined the walls, their spines cracked from frequent use. Papers covered the desk in organized chaos, notes and diagrams and half-finished thoughts. And in the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a false panel that Alara remembered watching her father access when she was very young, lay a leather journal she had never seen before. Not the journal Mira had given her, not the pages Malachar had provided. Something else, something her father had hidden even from those he trusted. Alara opened it with trembling hands and began to read. The handwriting was cramped, urgent, the words of a man racing against time he knew was running out. If you are reading this, I am dead. And if I am dead, then I failed to stop what is coming. Malachar Shadowbane is not my friend. He is not my colleague. He is the enemy I have spent the last 5 years trying to unmask, and he is more dangerous than anyone in this kingdom understands. The bond cannot be transferred from one person to another under normal circumstances. It passes through bloodlines, awakening in some generations and remaining dormant in others. But Malachar discovered a way around this limitation, a dark ritual that allows the bond to be ripped from a dying carrier and absorbed by whoever performs the ceremony. He needs 3 things for the ritual to work. First, a carrier who has been weakened almost to the point of death. Second, a moment of maximum expenditure, when the carrier pours everything they have into a single healing. And third, physical proximity, close enough to catch the energy as it leaves the dying body. I believe he killed the old king, not with shadow beasts, but by manipulating me into overusing my power to save a man who had been deliberately poisoned. The king survived. I nearly died. And Malachar was there, watching, waiting, ready to complete his ritual. But I did not die. The bond sustained me longer than he expected, and in my recovery I began to see the pattern. He is patient. He has waited decades for this opportunity. He will wait decades more if necessary. But he will not stop. The bond is everything to him. He believes it will make him immortal, invincible, a god among wolves. If you are my daughter, if Alara is reading these words, then know this. He will come for you. He will pretend to help you. He will teach you techniques that seem powerful, but are designed to drain you, to weaken you, to prepare you for the harvest. Do not trust him. Do not let him close. And whatever you do, do not use the bond the way he teaches you to use it. There is another way, a true way. The bond was never meant to be a one-way flow of energy from healer to healed. It was meant to be shared, connected, distributed across a network of bonded souls who support each other. Find your pack, find your mate, and when the moment comes, do not try to carry the burden alone. Share it. That is the only way to survive. I love you, daughter. I am sorry I could not tell you this in person. I am sorry I could not protect you from what is coming. But I believe in you. I always have. Your father, Aldrich. Alara closed the journal. Her hands had stopped trembling. In their place was something harder, colder, the crystalline clarity of someone who finally understood the shape of the battlefield. Malachar had killed her father, had killed the old king, had almost certainly killed Marcus, Theron's brother, and now he was doing the same thing to her, draining her life force drop by drop, preparing her for a ritual that would steal the bond from her dying body. She had one advantage. He did not know that she knew. But that advantage would not last long. Theron listened to everything without interrupting. They stood in his private chambers, the journal open on his desk between them, the evidence of Malachar's treachery laid bare in her father's cramped handwriting. When she finished speaking, when she had explained everything she had learned and everything she suspected, he remained silent for a long moment. Then he moved. His fist slammed into the wall hard enough to crack stone. The impact echoed through the chamber like thunder. "I will kill him!" The words came out as a growl, more wolf than man. "I will tear out his throat and watch him choke on his own blood." Not yet. Alara caught his arm before he could turn toward the door. If you move against him now, without public proof, his allies will claim you are a tyrant eliminating political enemies. The kingdom will fracture. Civil war will follow. I do not care. You should, because civil war is exactly what our enemies beyond the borders are waiting for. She held his gaze, refusing to flinch from the fury burning in his amber eyes. We need to expose him, publicly, undeniably. We need the kingdom to see what he is before we destroy him. How? We give him what he wants. We let him think his plan is working. And when he makes his final move, we turn his trap into ours. The plan was simple in conception and terrifying in execution. Alara would continue her lessons with Malachar, pretending to grow weaker, pretending to trust him more with each passing day. She would allow him to believe that she was approaching the threshold he needed, the point of maximum weakness where his ritual could succeed. Meanwhile, Theron would gather loyal forces in secret. Ragnar would position the pack for rapid response. And when Malachar finally revealed himself, when he made his move to complete the ritual, they would be ready. Malachar made his move on the 7th day. Not against Alara directly. He was too clever for that. Instead, he orchestrated an attack on Ashford Village, a settlement 3 hours' ride from the palace where hundreds of innocent people lived and worked and had no idea they were about to become pawns in a monster's game. The shadow beasts struck at midday. Dozens of them, more than had ever been seen in a single attack, materializing from darkness and tearing through the village with methodical savagery. They did not kill indiscriminately. They wounded. They poisoned. They left survivors who would die slowly and painfully unless someone with the power to heal them arrived in time. The message reached the palace within hours. Hundreds wounded, shadow beast venom spreading, no healer capable of treating them. Without intervention, they would all be dead by morning. It was exactly the trap Alara had expected. She was already moving before the messenger finished speaking, striding toward the stables with Theron at her side and Ragnar close behind. "This is it," she said. "He wants me to exhaust myself saving them. He will be there, waiting, ready to complete his ritual the moment I collapse." "Then do not go." Theron caught her arm. "Let me send healers, soldiers, anyone else. You do not have to walk into his trap." "Yes, I do. Because if I do not go, hundreds of people will die. Innocent people who have done nothing wrong except live in a village that Malachar chose as his killing ground." She met his eyes. "This is who I am, Theron. This is what the bond is for. I cannot hide in safety while others suffer." "Then I'm coming with you." "I am counting on it." They rode hard, pushing their horses to the limit, the pack running alongside in their wolf forms. The sun was setting when they reached Ashford, painting the sky in shades of red and orange that matched the fires still burning among the ruined buildings. The devastation was worse than the reports had suggested. Bodies lay in the streets, some dead, most dying, the black wounds of shadow beast venom spreading across their flesh like dark flowers blooming. The survivors huddled in a central square, too wounded to flee, too terrified to hope. Alara dismounted and walked among them. She could feel every injury, every drop of venom, every life hanging by a thread. The bond pulsed inside her, demanding to be used, screaming at her to heal and save and pour herself out until nothing remained. But her father's words echoed in her mind. "Do not try to carry the burden alone. Share it." She found Theron beside her, his hand on her shoulder, found Ragnar at her back, solid and dependable, found the 30 wolves of the pack arranged in a circle around the square, their eyes fixed on her, their bond connections humming with readiness. She was not alone. She had never been alone. "Stay close," she told Theron. "Whatever happens, stay close." Then she knelt beside the first victim and began to heal. The golden light spread from her hands, purging venom, mending wounds, pulling the dying back from the edge. She moved from victim to victim, not draining herself completely on each one, but giving only what was needed, conserving her strength, working smarter rather than harder. It was not enough. There were too many wounded, too much poison, too little time. Even with her improved technique, she could feel her reserves depleting, her body weakening, the familiar exhaustion creeping in at the edges of her consciousness. She had saved perhaps 30 people when Malachar appeared. He stepped out of the shadows at the edge of the square, his storm-gray eyes gleaming with triumph. Lord Varen flanked him on one side, a dozen armed men on the other. Behind them, more shadow beasts prowled, held in check by the dark mage's will. "Magnificent," Malachar said, his voice carrying across the carnage. "Truly magnificent. You have exceeded all my expectations, Alara. Your father would be proud." "My father would want me to kill you." She rose to her feet, swaying slightly, drawing on reserves she was not certain she had. "He knew what you are, Malachar. He knew what you did to him. He left me everything." Something flickered in the mage's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, quickly hidden. "Then you know why I am here. You know what I need from you. The bond. You want to steal it, to rip it from my dying body the way you tried to rip it from his." "Steal is such an ugly word." Malachar stepped closer, his smile never wavering. "I prefer inherit. The bond has been wasted on your bloodline for generations, healers and helpers, content to save a few lives when they could reshape the world. In my hands, it will become what it was always meant to be, a weapon, a tool of absolute power. You killed my father for this, killed King Marcus, would have killed Theron on that mountain. Sacrifices for a greater purpose." Malachar spread his hands. "History will not remember them. History will remember only what I achieve with the power I claim tonight." Theron moved to stand beside Alara, his body tense, ready to shift at a moment's notice. "You will claim nothing, traitor. Your conspiracy is exposed. Your allies are known. Whatever happens here, you will not leave this village alive." Bold words from a king who has already lost. Malachar's smile widened. "Look around you, Your Majesty. Hundreds of your subjects lie dying. Your mate has exhausted herself trying to save them, and I have an army of shadow beasts ready to tear apart anyone who interferes." He laughed, a cold sound that echoed off the ruined buildings. "This is not a battle, this is a harvest, and I have been waiting a very long time for this fruit to ripen." He raised his hand, and the shadow beasts surged forward. The pack met them in a clash of fur and darkness. 30 wolves against dozens of nightmare creatures, fighting with the desperate fury of those protecting something precious. Ragnar led the charge, his massive form tearing through shadow beasts with the skill of 60 years of warfare. But it was not enough. The shadow beasts kept coming, materializing from nothing, endless reinforcements summoned by Malakar's dark magic. For every one the pack killed, 2 more appeared. And in the chaos, Malakar advanced on Alara. Theron intercepted him, shifting into his wolf form mid-leap, golden fur blazing in the firelight. His jaws snapped at the mage's throat. Malakar moved faster. His hand shot out, wreathed in shadows, and caught Theron mid-leap. Dark energy crackled through the king's body, forcing him back into human form, driving him to his knees. "Predictable," the mage said, drawing a blade from his robes. The metal was black, wrong somehow, as if it had been forged from solidified darkness. "You should have stayed on your throne, boy king. This was never your fight." He drove the blade into Theron's side. Alara screamed. The sound tore from her throat as she watched her mate collapse, watched the black venom from the cursed blade spread through his body, watched his amber eyes find hers with desperation and love and terrible apology. "Now!" Malakar turned to her, the bloody blade still in his hand. "We complete what was begun so long ago. Heal him, Alara. Pour everything you have into saving him. Give me the opening I need." She could feel the trap closing around her, could feel the ritual Malakar had prepared, the dark magic waiting to snatch the bond from her the moment she pushed herself past the point of recovery. If she healed Theron, she would die. If she did not heal him, he would die. Either way, Malakar won. She knelt beside Theron and placed her hands on his wound. The venom was spreading faster than any she had encountered before, eating through his flesh with supernatural hunger. He had minutes at most. "Alara." His voice was barely a whisper. "Do not. Let me go. Do not give him what he wants." "I cannot lose you." Tears streamed down her face. "I will not." "Then do not try to save me alone." The words hit her like lightning. "Do not try to carry the burden alone. Share it." Her father's voice. Theron's voice. The same message, echoing across years and moments, pointing her toward a truth she had almost forgotten. The bond was not meant for one person. It was meant for many. A network of shared strength, distributed across all who were connected. She closed her eyes and reached for the pack. The connections were there, humming at the edges of her consciousness. 30 wolves, each one bonded to her through the ancient magic of the true Luna. She had used those connections before, to coordinate them in battle, to sense their locations and emotions, but she had never tried to use them for this. She opened the channels wide. Energy flowed into her, not much from any single wolf, but 30 trickles combining into a stream. She felt Winter's fierce determination, Ragnar's steady strength, the eager loyalty of the younger pack members. Their power joined with hers, amplifying the bond beyond anything she had achieved alone. She pulled the venom from Theron's body. Golden light exploded outward, brighter than the sun, brighter than anything Malakar had ever seen. It swept across the battlefield, touching every wounded villager, every injured wolf, every dying soul who had been caught in the night's violence. And it healed them all. The shadow beasts screamed as the light reached them. Creatures of darkness, they could not survive such radiance. They dissolved one after another, burning away like shadows before dawn. Malakar stumbled backward, his face contorted with shock and fury. "Impossible! The bond cannot work like this. You should be dead. You should be empty." "My father figured it out before he died." Alara rose to her feet, the golden light still pouring from her, fed by 30 connections that showed no signs of faltering. "The bond is not about sacrifice, it is about sharing, and I have a pack that shares my burden." She extended her hand toward him. The light focused, intensified, became a beam of pure healing energy directed at a single target. But healing and destruction were 2 sides of the same coin. The power that could mend flesh could also unmake it. The force that could purge poison could also purge life. Malakar raised his hands, summoning shadows to shield himself. For a moment, darkness and light warred against each other, 2 fundamental forces locked in opposition. Then Theron moved. He had risen while Malachar was distracted, healed but not helpless, his amber eyes blazing with fury. He shifted into his wolf form and launched himself at the mage with all the power of an alpha king defending his mate. His jaws closed on Malachar's throat. The shadows dissipated. The dark magic collapsed, and the man who had orchestrated the deaths of kings and the suffering of kingdoms died in the dirt of a village he had tried to use as a killing ground. Varen tried to flee. He turned and ran the moment Malachar fell, abandoning his allies, thinking only of escape. He did not get far. Ragnar intercepted him at the edge of the square, shifting to human form to drag the traitor to his knees. "Going somewhere, Lord Varen?" "Please," the noble's voice cracked with terror. "I was forced. Malachar threatened my family, my lands. I had no choice." "There is always a choice." Ragnar's grip tightened. "You chose wrong." Theron approached, still in wolf form, blood dripping from his muzzle. He shifted back to human, and his eyes were cold as winter ice. "Lord Varen," he said formally, "you are charged with treason against the crown, conspiracy to commit murder, and collaboration with an enemy of the realm. You will be taken back to the palace to stand trial. If found guilty, you will be executed." "Mercy, Your Majesty, please, I beg you." "The time for mercy was before you helped slaughter innocent villagers." Theron turned away. "Take him, and make sure he survives the journey. He will answer for his crimes publicly, so all can see the price of betrayal." The remaining guards bound Varen and led him away. The traitor's screams for mercy faded into the night. Silence fell. The golden light faded slowly, leaving Alara standing in the center of a square that had been transformed from a scene of horror to something approaching peace. The wounded were healed. The shadow beasts were gone. The pack stood victorious, battered but alive. Theron pulled her into his arms. "You did it," he breathed against her hair. "You saved them all." "We did it." She held him tightly, feeling the bond pulse between them, stronger than ever. All of us, together. The coronation took place 1 week later. The great hall of this palace had been transformed. Banners hung from every pillar. Torches blazed in their sconces. The nobility of Thornhaven filled the chamber, standing in ranks according to their station, their faces carefully neutral as they waited to witness an Omega become queen. Alara wore white, but this time the gown was anything but simple. Silk and silver thread, embroidered with moons and wolves, fitted to her body by seamstresses who had worked through the night to complete it. Her hair was piled atop her head, held in place by pins of silver and pearl. She felt like a stranger wearing someone else's clothes. Mira stood at the front of the hall, holding the crown that would complete the ceremony. It was not the elaborate piece worn by queens of old, but something simpler, more personal. The crown that had belonged to Theron's mother, passed down through generations of Luna queens. "The kingdom recognizes Alara Thornwood as true Luna," Mira announced, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "Bonded to Packen King, healer of the wounded, savior of Ashford, destroyer of the Shadow Mage. Let any who challenge this claim speak now or hold their peace forever." Silence. No one moved. No one dared. Mira placed the crown on Alara's head. The weight of it was less than she expected. The significance was greater. "Rise, Queen Alara of Thornhaven. May your reign be long and your wisdom guide us through whatever darkness lies ahead." Alara rose and turned to face the assembled crowd. Hundreds of eyes stared back at her, some welcoming, some skeptical, all waiting to see what kind of queen this former healer's assistant would become. She found Theron in the front row, his amber eyes warm with pride and love. Found Ragnar beside him, scarred and steady, the first to bow when she caught his gaze. Found the faces of pack members scattered throughout the crowd, her wolves, her family, the network that had saved her life and the lives of so many others. And she spoke. "I did not seek this crown. I did not dream of power or position or the privilege of ruling over others." She kept her voice steady, projecting it to reach even the farthest corners of the hall. "I grew up overlooked in these halls, the daughter of a dead hero, tolerated but never valued, useful but never acknowledged." She paused, letting the words settle. "But I learned something in my years of being unnoticed. I learned that every life matters, that the servant scrubbing floors deserves the same care as the lord dining above them. That strength is not measured by the power you wield, but by the burdens you are willing to carry for others." Her eyes swept the crowd, finding faces she recognized and faces she did not. "My father died protecting this kingdom. He gave everything he had, poured out his life drop by drop, because he believed that was what the ancestral bond demanded. She touched her chest, where the bond pulsed with warmth. He was wrong. The bond does not demand sacrifice. It demands connection. It asks us to share our burdens, to support each other, to recognize that we are stronger together than we could ever be apart. She stepped forward, descending from the raised platform where the throne sat. I will not rule from a distance. I will not hide behind walls while my people suffer. I am a healer. That is what I was born to be, and as your queen, I will heal not just wounds of the flesh, but wounds of the spirit. I will work to build a kingdom where no one is forgotten, where every life is valued, where we face our enemies not as individuals, but as a pack. She reached the floor of the hall and extended her hands. This is my promise to you. Not perfection, not miracles, simply this. I will see you. I will fight for you, and I will never stop trying to be worthy of the trust you place in me. For a long moment no one moved. Then Ragnar stepped forward and knelt, his scarred head bowed. True Luna, he said, his voice rough with emotion, we are honored to serve. One by one, others followed. Lords and ladies, soldiers and servants, wolves of the pack and wolves of the court. They knelt before her, not because tradition demanded it, but because something in her words had reached them. Theron was the last to kneel. He took her hand, pressed a kiss to her knuckles, and looked up at her with eyes that held the promise of a lifetime. My queen, he said simply. My Luna, my love. Alara pulled him to his feet and kissed him in front of the entire kingdom. Let them see, let them know, let them understand that this reign would be built on partnership, not hierarchy, on love, not obligation. The hall erupted in cheers, and Alara Thornwood, who had spent her life unnoticed, became queen of everything. 4 years later, the garden behind the palace bloomed with flowers that Alara had planted herself, herbs and healing plants mixed with roses and lilies in a riot of color that would have horrified any formal gardener. She liked it that way. Order had its place, but so did wildness. She sat on a bench near the center of the garden, watching her daughter play. Astrid was 3 years old, golden-haired like her father, blue-eyed like her mother, with a laugh that could brighten the darkest day. She was currently attempting to climb onto Ragnar's back while the old warrior pretended to be a horse, his dignity sacrificed completely to the whims of a small child. You are too old for this, Alara called out, smiling. Ragnar looked up, his weathered face creased with a grin. I am 62 years old. I have fought in more battles than I can count. I have served 4 rulers of this kingdom. He grunted as Astrid finally managed to clamber onto his shoulders. And this small princess is more exhausting than all of them combined. She is not a princess, Alara reminded him. She is the true Luna's daughter. Ragnar bounced gently, making Astrid squeal with delight. That makes her a princess whether you like it or not. Theron appeared at the garden entrance, pausing to take in the scene before him. His hair had grown longer in the years since their bonding, falling past his shoulders in waves that Alara loved to run her fingers through. A few strands of gray had appeared at his temples, but they only made him look more distinguished. He crossed to her bench and sat beside her, his hand finding hers with the ease of long practice. Mira finished her book, he said. She wants to present it to the council next week. A complete history of the ancestral bond, including everything your father discovered and everything you have learned since. Good. Alara leaned against his shoulder. The knowledge should be preserved, shared, so that no one ever has to figure it out alone the way I did. Speaking of which, Theron's voice dropped. I felt something this morning, through the pack bond, coming from Astrid. Alara nodded slowly. She had felt it too, the faint stirring of power in her daughter's blood, the first signs of the ancestral bond awakening. She has the gift. Yes. Theron watched their daughter playing, his expression a mixture of pride and concern. She is young, too young to understand what it means. Then we teach her. We tell her the truth from the beginning. We make sure she knows that the bond is not a burden to be carried alone. Alara squeezed his hand. She will have what I did not have. Family, pack, someone to share the weight with her. She will have us. Yes, she will have us. Astrid tumbled off Ragnar's back with a shriek of laughter. The old warrior caught her before she could hit the ground, swinging her up into the air while she giggled and demanded to do it again. Alara watched them, her heart full to bursting. 4 years ago, she had climbed a mountain to gather herbs, expecting nothing but cold and exhaustion, and perhaps death. Instead, she had found a dying king, a power she never knew she possessed, a destiny she never imagined. She had lost her anonymity, had gained a crown, a mate, a pack, a daughter, had faced monsters both supernatural and human and had survived them all. But the greatest gift was not the power or the position. It was these ordinary moments of extraordinary love, watching her daughter play, holding her husband's hand, knowing that she had built something that would outlast her, a legacy, a family, a future. Her father had died alone, convinced that the bond demanded sacrifice. She had learned a different lesson. The bond demanded connection, sharing, the courage to let others help carry the weight. And in that sharing, she had found not diminishment but strength, not emptiness but fullness, not death but life, abundant and overflowing. "Mama!" Astrid came running, her small feet pounding on the garden path. "Mama, watch me! Uncle Ragnar says I can climb the big tree!" Alara opened her arms, catching her daughter in an embrace that smelled of grass and sunshine and pure joy. "Show me," she said. "Show me everything." And as the afternoon light painted the garden in gold, as Theron's hand remained warm in hers, as Ragnar groaned about his aging joints while preparing to spot a 3-year-old's climbing expedition, Alara understood at last what it meant to be true Luna. Not power, not position, not the ability to heal the unhealable. Simply this, the willingness to stay, the courage to connect, the strength to let yourself be seen. She had spent a lifetime being overlooked. Now she was seen by everyone who mattered, and that was enough. That was everything. The end.